Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Today we're in the fifth Perek of Basra. We're halfway through the Septa, which means that we're going to be finishing Bava Basra early next week by Sanhedrin. Good stuff. Um, Today's Shia is the Nishma Zaranach and Sukkah Kohen Nishma Mocha Meshem Sabracha Sabish Boleb and Binam Moshe Ben Yosef Ben Yedin Hashem will have an aliyah. And before Shlema for Yisrael Baruch Aliyah Racha Bas Pasal Zelda Racha Aliyah Bas Yar Bracha Armin Yisrael Barisha Chai Bas Tu Bela for Shlema Self Shar Chal Yisrael. And shout out to our good friends at the Imperial Advisory Group for sponsoring this month's Shiurim. If you or your company need help with the financials and need help from the CFO, please reach out to them at imperialgrp.com. Okay, Perek Hey of Bava Basra continues the topic from yesterday, which was about all the sales of properties. This chapter is this Perek is dealing mostly with movable properties. We'll get into that now. So, Perek Hey Mishnah Aleph HaMocher Sasfina. If someone sells a ship, he has not sold only the ship itself. It's not just the boat. Macher es hatoren, es hanes, es ha'ugin, es kol ha'manhigan also. But he has also sold the mast, so that's the long wooden pole that rises vertically from the deck of the ship to where the sails are attached. That's called the mast. Those of you that are not up on your nautical knowledge. The sails and the anchor. He's also sold all the things that move the ship or assist in its steering. So all these are considered part of the ship, and they're therefore included in the sale. So you're not just selling the actual boat part. Like think of a rowboat. You have the actual boat, but when you're dealing with the actual ship, you would think that the mast and all these sales are not considered part of the ship, but it's part of the ship. It all goes together when you sell the ship. Avalon macher lo es havadim, that he has not sold the slaves that were used by the seller as the ship's crew, lo es hamarzufin, and nor has he sold the sacks that held the cargo, lo es ha'antiki, certainly has not sold the cargo itself, even though these things are all kept in the ship and used with it, they are not part of the ship, therefore they are not included in the sale. It was much, if the seller said to the buyer, I'm selling you the ship and everything that is inside it, then all those items are sold as well. For the extra phrase that everything that's inside it includes all the things that are normally kept on a ship. Obviously, he's not selling the passenger's belongings because those are his to sell. Macher Zakon, someone who sold the wagon has sold only the wagon itself. Lo Macher es Pardus, but he has not sold a pair of mules that pull it, provided that they are not attached to the wagon at the time of the sale. If they are attached at the time of the sale, then they are included in the sale. Macher es Pardus, as a Pardus. But if he sold the pair of mules, I'm not sure if that's the word correct or not. Lo Macher es Akaron, he has not sold the wagon, even if they are attached to the wagon at the time of the sale. Why? Because since mules can be used fighting the wagon is not included with the sale of the animals unless it is specifically mentioned. Maras had said, someone sold the yoke. That's the bar that's used to attach a team of oxen and rows that they work together to plow a field. Lo Machar Sabakar, he has not sold the team of oxen that use it. Machar Sabakar, and if you sold the team of oxen, Lo Machar Zatzemet, he has not sold the yoke that joins them. Yehuda says, Adamim Lodian, the price tells us what is included in the sale. Kate said, how's this? How so? Amalo, if the buyer said to Machalit Semitcha, my son Zuz, selling your yoke for 200 Zuz, he could not have meant to buy only the yoke. However, you do wish, ain't had 7 everyone knows that a yoke is not sold for 200 tuz. In such a case, Yehuda holds that the oxen would be included. But that's not the normal price. If the yoke was a simple bar of wood, it could be purchased for a single zoo. So why would they sell for 200? The Chachamim say, "Ein hadan raya." The price is not a proof. Sometimes the person will deliberately overpay for something because he wants to give the buyer a gift. Therefore, even in such a case, the sale of a yoke does not include the auction. Um, Mishnah Beis. Hamocher is hachamor. Someone sells the donkey. Lo machakilav. He has not sold its carrying gear. Even if the donkey is wearing it at the time of the sale, that's according to the Tanakama, who holds that a donkey is used mainly for riding. That the gear is not included unless it is specifically mentioned at the time of the sale. Nachman says that if someone sells a donkey, he has sold its carrying gear, provided that the donkey was wearing it at the time of the sale. If the donkey is not wearing the carrying gear, however, even Nachman Madi agrees that it is not included in the sale. Rabbi Yehuda says, there are times when the carrying gear is sold, and there are times when it is not so. Kate said, "How so? If there was a donkey standing in front of the buyer and it was wearing its carrying gear, he said to the seller, "Sell me this donkey, yours have a kela mechurin, and even the carrying gear is sold." Since the buyer added the extra word, this instead of simply saying "sell me the donkey," so your donkey, we see that he wanted to buy the donkey as it is, together with the carrying gear that is wearing. If you told the donkey and said, "This is your donkey," upon being told that it was, he bought it, and Caleb Mechurin, and his carrying gear is not sold, even if it was on the donkey at the time of the sale. Mishnah Gimel. If someone sells a donkey, it specifies that he is selling a nursing donkey. Macher is a siyach. He has sold the donkey's foal along with the mother. Since the non-kosher milk of the donkey has no value except as food for a foal, we say that the seller mentioned a nursing donkey because he intended to sell the foal along with the mother. Macher is a para, but if someone sells a cow, specifies that he's selling a nursing cow. Lo macher es benah, he has not sold its child. Since the milk of a cow is valuable as a food, the seller may have simply meant that the cow is producing milk, not that the calf was included in the sale. Macher ashba, if he sold a pile of manure, macher zivla, he has sold its manure as well. Um, Meaning, sorry, if you sold the manure pile, it refers to the pit that is 3 tefachim deep or raised the area 3 tefachim high, which was used to store manure that was kept for fertilizer. Machabor, have similarly, if you sold the pit, Machar Mema, if he has sold its waters. Machar Kaveres, if he sold the beehive, Machar Devorim, he has sold its bees. Machar Shuvach, and if he sold the dovecote, Machar Yonim, he has sold its pigeons. Halakeach Pero Shuvach Mechavero, someone buys the production of a dovecote from his fellow, from the meaning the pigeons that will be born during the next year. You must chase away the first pair of pigeons that are born, so they will return to the seller's dovecote. These birds, together with their parents, are kept by the seller, so that his dovecote continued to produce the following year. Peiros kaveres, if someone buys the production of a beehive, meaning all the bees that will be born in the next year, no tel shlosha chilin umisaris, he takes the first 3 swarms of newly born bees that exit the seller's hive, and after that he takes every other swarm, but he must leave the rest for the seller so the seller's hive will have enough bees to survive as well. Chalos devash, if he bought the honeycombs of the hive and the extra chalos, he must leave 2 combs in the hive so the bees can eat their honey during the winter season, and the hive will not be destroyed. Zayisum coats. If someone bought the branches of olive trees to cut down for firewood, and stay groofios, he must leave two branches behind for the seller. Since only the branches were sold and not the tree itself, the buyer must leave enough of the tree behind so that it will grow back. Mishnah Dalet Hakona Shnei Ilanos V'Sok Stei Chaveiro. If someone buys two fruit-bearing trees that are located within his fellow's field, Hareza Lo Kana Karka. He has not brought any land along. He has not bought any land along with the trees. Rather, he has bought the right to leave the trees growing within his fellow's field as long as they live, and the right to the fruit of the trees, as well as the wood of the trees themselves. Meir says, Kana Karka, he has bought the land as well. If the trees grew larger after the sale, Yashbeh, the seller may not cut them back, even though the shade of the trees is not good for his field. For he is mechuyev to provide support for the trees from his land while they live. Where all that mints or branches grow from the trunk of the tree above ground level belong to him, as they are considered part of the tree. But whatever shoots grow from the roots, it is the if they are attached beneath the ground, they belong to the owner of the field. If the tree dies, the buyer has no rights to the land, to plant new trees in their place. Rather, he must uproot the dead trees and remove them from the land. If he bought three or more trees, Kana Karka, he has all bought the land that's under beneath and between the trees, along with the trees themselves. This land is considered that one receives when he buys three or more fruit-bearing trees. If the trees grew after the sale and spread it outside the area that belongs to the buyer, Yashba, the seller, may cut them back because the shade of the trees is not good for the seller, does not good for the seller's lands, and the buyer has no claim to any land that was not included in the sale. And whatever shoots or branches grow from the trees, whether they grow from the trunk of the tree or the roots, belong to the buyer, because both the trees themselves and the ground beneath them belong to him. And if the tree dies, he still owns the land, and he may plant other trees to take their place. Mishnah Hamocher Rosh Behemagasa. If someone sells the head of a large animal, Lo Macher as Reglayim. He has not sold the legs of the animal together with the head, as the legs of a large animal contain enough meat to be considered a separate section. Machas Haraglayim. Certainly, if he sold the legs, Lo Machas Harosh, he has not sold the head. Machas Hakana. Similarly, if he sold the windpipe section of a large animal, which includes both the lungs and the heart of the animal, Lo Machas Hakaved, he has not sold the liver. Machras Hakaved, if he sold the liver of a large animal, Lo Machras Hakana, he has not sold the windpipe section. Each of these is considered significant on its own and is not included in the sale of the other of a badka. But when someone sells a section of a small animal, I mean a sheep or a goat, the halacha is different. Because some sections are small and they are customarily included with the sale of the larger sections. Machas Harosh, so someone who sold the head, Machas Haraglayim, he has sold the legs in this case. Machas Haraglayim was the one who sold the legs, well, Machas Harosh, he has not sold the head, even in the case of a small animal, because the head of even a small animal is significant enough to be sold on its own. Machras Hakana, similarly, one who sold the windpipe section of a small animal, Machras Hakaved has also sold the liver along with it. Machras Hakaved, but one who sold the liver, Machras Hakana, has not sold the windpipe section, which is more vav. There are four different rulings in cases of sales fraud. So in every case where someone should withdraw from a sale because of a claim of fraud, one of these four rulings will apply. So either one, only the buyer can withdraw. Two, only the seller can withdraw. Three, neither one of them can withdraw. Or four, either one of them can withdraw. So now we're going to list cases where each of these rulings apply. So the first case, if the seller sold them wheat and told them that it was of fine quality, and it was found to be of poor quality, the buyer has the right to withdraw from the sale. The seller does not. Since the buyer is the one who was cheated, it's up to him to decide whether he wants to proceed with the sale. If he decides he wants the wheat anyway, the seller may not cancel the sale. The second case, Raos, if the buyer told the seller that the wheat was of poor quality, then there's Yafos, and it was found to be wheat of fine quality. Ma, and the laws, yeah, all the seller has the right to withdraw from the sale, but not the buyer. Since in this case it is the seller who had the wheat, in any case, the buyer must accept it. In the third case, Raos, the seller told him that he was selling wheat of poor quality. It was indeed found to be of poor quality. Yafos and Nipsu Yafos. Or if he told him that he was selling wheat of fine quality, it was indeed found to be of fine quality. Then neither one has the right to withdraw from the sale. In the fourth case, Shechamtis, the seller told him that he was selling him red wheat, the Nimsis Levana, and it was found to be white wheat. Levana Nimsis Shechamtis, or if he told him that he was selling him white wheat and it was found to be red wheat, ate some shosais, or similarly, if he told him that he was selling him olive wood, wood, shikma v'nimsu shosais, or that it was sycamore wood and it was found to be olive wood, yayin nimsa chomet, or similarly, if the seller told him that he was selling wine and was found to be vinegar, chomet nimsa yayin, or vinegar and it was found to be wine, shneim yicholin lachzer behen. In all cases of this type, either one of the two can withdraw from the sale if he wishes. So some people prefer red wheat and others white wheat. Some require one type of wood rather than another, or wine rather than vinegar. Either the buyer or the seller can cancel the sale payment is not what they had agreed upon. Mishnah Zion. If someone sells produce such as barrels of grain or sacks of nuts to his fellow, Mashach, and the buyer pulled them from the public street in which they were located into another courtyard that he owns at least partially, and then even if he did not measure the amount of grain or nuts that he took, Kana, he has acquired them, and the sale is complete. By pulling the items from the street into a place that is his, he has performed the killing of Meshicha, and the items are his. Although he does not yet know exactly how much he has bought, he can find out later when he examines his purchase more closely. Ma'adad, however, if the seller measured the grain or nuts and placed them in the barrel into the barrels of the buyer, if the buyer did not pull them from the street into a courtyard that he owns, lo kana, he has not acquired them, because he did not make a kinyan, even though he knows exactly how much he is buying and the produce is already in his barrel. Since he did not yet pull them from the street, the sale is not yet complete, and either party can withdraw from the sale. But if the buyer is smart, wishes to complete this quickly, so come on, he can, meaning that if the produce is lying in the property of the seller, instead of having to pull it into his own property in order to acquire it, the buyer can simply rent the area from the seller. The produce will then be lying on his land, and he automatically acquires it through the kinyan called chatzer, meaning courtyard without having to move the produce at all. Going on. Someone buys flax from his fellow. Lo kana. He has not acquired it until he actually picks it up and moves it from place to place. Since flax is slippery and pulls apart easily, it was packed in small, light bundles, and movables that are easily lifted must be acquired through the kinyan of Hagbah. Therefore, to acquire the flax, he must pick it up. If he pulls it without lifting, he does not acquire it. But if the flax is still attached to the ground of the seller's field with talash koshehu, and the buyer detached even a tiny amount of it, kana, he has thereby acquired all of it. By picking a small amount of the flax, he acquires a temporary ownership in the land, which allows him to acquire the flax at the same time. Mishnah Ches. If someone sells wine or oil to his fellow, the hukru oshehuzlu, and as the goods are being poured into the bar container, the price went up or their price went down. So one of the parties wants to withdraw from the sale. Halacha is im ashlonis malis hamida. If the price changed before the container was filled completely, all the wine or the oil still belongs to the seller, and other party may withdraw from the sale. Mission is malis hamida. But if the price changed after the container was filled, the cash and the goods already belong to the buyer. Once the container is filled, the buyer automatically acquires the wine or oil, and the sale is complete. But if there was a broker between them, if the container belongs to a broker who was buying the wine or oil from the seller and then selling it to the buyer, Nishbara Echavis, then if the barrel breaks after it's filled, Nishbara is for the broker. The broker intended to acquire the wine or oil for himself and then sell it to the buyer. It was therefore his when the barrel broke, and he must bear the loss, not the buyer. And the seller must tip out 3 drops for him. If someone is selling the entire contents of a container, he must pour out the wine or oil into the buyer's container. And then let 3 more drops of the remains of the liquid drip into the buyer's container as well. Herkina umatza arehu shamocher. Once he has given the buyer those 3 drops, if he then tilted the container on its side and more liquid collected, this leftover liquid belongs to the seller, since the buyer does not expect to receive every last drop. But a shopkeeper who makes many sales one after the other does not have to tip out the three does not have to tip out 3 drops for each buyer. Since he is busy with his many sales, we do not trouble him to do this. Rabbi Yehuda says, Erev Shabbos in Chashecha Pater. On Friday, when it's close to evening, he is Pater, because the Shabbos is near and he is very rushed. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it is only right before Shabbos that a shopkeeper does not need to tip out the 3 drops. But at all other times, even a shopkeeper must tip out 3 drops for the buyer. Mishnah Tes, Hashalech has been no Eitzel Chenvani Ufunjon Yado. Someone sent his young son to a shopkeeper with a punjon, which is a coin that's worth two isers, and an empty jug in his hand. So he wanted to buy a full jug of oil for 1 iser and receive the oil and 1 iser change in return. The boy came to the store and gave the punjon and the jug to the shopkeeper. The mother loved Isha Shemen. Shopkeeper then took the jug from the boy, used it to measure oil for other customers. Then he measured out the oil for the boy and put it into the jug. The Nasalo Esa Iser gave him the filled jug and the Iser of the father's change as well. Shavar Esa Sluchis, Ribe Esa Iser. The boy that was on his way home, and the way he extended both the jug Isser as well. In this case, the law is that the shopkeeper's oil and it's because he should not have sent them back without permission. Be responsible delivery boy. Therefore, the Tana holds that the intention of the father sending the son was only to notify the shopkeeper they want to buy a jug of oil, and have the oil and Isser of change to be delivered to him by a responsible adult, not to offer his son as delivery person. Since the seller should have realized this, he's irresponsible, sending the jug back with the child, and he must pay for the loss of the oil and the change. Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yehuda Potter is the shopkeeper from liability. Sha'al Minas Ken Shluchu. This was with the intention that the buyer send his child in the first place. According to him, by sending the jug and the money to the shopkeeper, the son, the buyer showed that he wanted his son to bring back the oil and the change. The shopkeeper is not responsible for any mishap that occurred. And even though Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the shopkeeper should not have borrowed the jug without permission, he holds that this does not make him responsible for the accident that occurred later. The Moedim Chachamim, the Rabbi Yehuda, and the Chachamim would agree with Rabbi Yehuda, Bisman that Sluk is created. If the jug was in the hands of the child when he arrived at the shop, and the shopkeeper measured the oil out for him into the jug immediately without using it for anyone else first. That the shopkeeper is pater from liability for the jug if the boy breaks it later, as he did not borrow the jug without permission. Mishnah Yud. A wholesaler must wipe down his measures, his scales, and his measuring cups and his containers every 30 days so that the dried out dregs do not build up in the container, making it able to hold less. But a householder who uses his measurements much less often is required to wipe the containers clean once every 12 months. Since there's less to build up, then cleaning the measures once a year is sufficient. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, the opposite is true. The wholesaler uses his measures, constantly gives the liquid no chance to dry up inside the measures. So a yearly cleaning is enough. But the householder uses them only once in a while, must clean them every month so that nothing will dry inside them to make the measures smaller. The shopkeeper must wipe down his measures twice a week. He needs to wipe them down more often than the householder or the wholesaler. He must also wash his weights, which he uses on one side of the balance scale to weigh against the weight once a week. He must do this so that things do not stick to the weights and dry onto them, making the weights heavier. He must wipe out the pans of the scale after each and every weighing so that nothing from the previous sale remains in the pan. Or if anything is left in the pan, that would be cheating the next customer. And get out. I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, "Imagine I'm more aware with these rules about bilach, and one is selling items that are moist, like meat or fish. These items contain oil or fats that will stick to the weights and the scales. They must be cleaned regularly. Out of the yavesh and sarich. But if one is selling dry goods, such as grain or spices, there's no need to wipe down the scales because nothing will stick to the scales. If the custom is to add in the extra goods to the scale during the sale, the seller is required to add enough extra so that the scale will tilt for the buyer by a tefach. he must add enough to the side of the scale that contains the item being sold, so that side of the scale is not even with the weights on the other side, but instead is a tefach lower than the weights. Higher shokel low but iron. But if the customer says he weighs the items for him only until the two sides of the scale are even, and only adds the extra as a percentage of the sale at the end, noticing no gram of, then he must give him the extra weight using the following formula. 1/10 of a measure for every 10 measures of liquids that he sells, which is 1% of the sale. And 1/20th of a measure for every 20 measures of dry goods, which is 1/4 of 1%, which is 1/400th of the sale. Malcolm Shiragu Lama Bidaka, in a place where the custom is to measure using a small container and to use it several times when selling a large amount. Lo Yama Begasa, one may not measure once with a large container. Begasa Lo Yama Bedaka, and where the custom is to measure the large sales using a large container, one may not measure multiple times with a smaller container. And if the custom is to weigh a large purchase all at once, the buyer cannot make the seller weigh it out a liter at a time, because adding extra goods to tilt the scale by a tefach for each, because adding extra goods to tilt the scale by a tefach for each of many small weighings will cost the seller more. It's more time consuming. Limchok lo yigdash, but in a place where the custom is to level off the container until it is even with the top after it's filled, one may not heap the goods over the level of the top of the container. Ligdosh lo yimchok, and where the custom is to heap the goods over the top of the brim, one may not level off the container even if it charges less for the level container. In all cases, local customs must be followed. Thank you. With Perek Vav. Have a wonderful